In a world where celebrity often eclipses sincerity, one couple defied the spotlight and stunned a nation. At an opulent charity gala teeming with political insiders and Hollywood elites, a quiet pair, Karoline Leavitt and her husband Nicholas Riccio, didn't just endure ridicule from a Hollywood giant. They answered with quiet strength and dignity that reverberated far beyond the ballroom. It happened under the glittering chandeliers of Washington, D.C.'s Grand Meridian Hotel, at a veterans' benefit cloaked in prestige and polite formalities. Designer gowns and tailored suits graced the crowd, but tension lingered beneath the surface. Every handshake, every smile seemed charged with unspoken politics. All eyes shifted when Karoline Leavitt entered. Wearing a sleek navy gown and a shimmering silver cross around her neck, she was elegance with an edge, a presence that sliced through the ceremonial air. As the youngest White House press secretary in history and a known Trump loyalist, Karoline was not the evening's most welcome guest. But she hadn't come for approval. She came to honor veterans, something deeply personal to her. At her side stood Nicholas Riccio, quiet, poised, and largely unknown to the elite audience. In a classic black suit, the New Hampshire real estate developer blended in by design. What few realized was that Nicholas had once been homeless, a young man with no safety net who had carved out his future from sheer grit. His unassuming demeanor masked a life story more inspiring than any scripted Hollywood speech. Whispers soon filled the room. "Who is that? Doesn't look like a politician. Is he her security?" Then the night took a sharp turn. Former California governor and Hollywood icon Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped up to the podium. His signature bravado lit up the crowd, but his jokes took a darker turn, mocking Leavitt, questioning her relevance, and throwing shade at her mystery husband. The room laughed, nervously, uncomfortably, but not everyone joined in. And then, something unexpected happened. Karoline and Nicholas didn't flinch. They stood still, calm, steady, eyes clear. What followed wasn't a rebuttal filled with rage, but a moment of grace, composure, and undeniable presence that shifted the room's energy. It reminded everyone watching on screens, in person, or in spirit, that in an age dominated by noise, ego, and spectacle, quiet integrity still has power. This wasn't just a social event. It was a cultural jolt. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this aren't just about headlines. They're about hope, courage, and the people who remind us what truly matters. He was the night's marquee name, a Hollywood legend, a seasoned politician, and the guest of honor. Dressed in a navy suit tailored to his famously broad frame, Arnold Schwarzenegger stood tall at the podium, flashing a confident smile that echoed his on-screen charisma. "Thank you all for being here to honor our heroes," he began, his iconic voice booming like a scene lifted straight from True Lies. The audience applauded, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a calculated sharpness directed toward a particular table. Karoline Leavitt felt it immediately. Seated beneath the spotlight's outer reach, she caught the glint in Schwarzenegger's gaze. Her silver cross necklace caught the light as she shifted slightly, eyes narrowing. "He's about to stir the pot," she whispered. Her husband, Nicholas Riccio, remained composed, his posture relaxed but alert. "Let's see what he does," he replied calmly. "You know how to handle this." Karoline, the youngest White House press secretary in history and a fierce Trump loyalist, had faced her share of public fire. But tonight felt personal. Schwarzenegger's moderate Republican past and vocal disdain for Trump hinted that his words wouldn't be empty flattery. And they weren't. The former governor launched into his speech with grandeur, paying tribute to veterans with sweeping reverence. "We are here to celebrate those who defend freedom," he declared, raising a fist to thunderous applause. A veteran near the front leaned to a companion, nodding. "He's saying all the right things." But then, the tone shifted. "With us tonight," Schwarzenegger said, his smile sharpening, "we have a few political stars as well." He paused. The crowd held its breath. "Like Miss Karoline Leavitt," he continued, locking eyes with her, "who turns every press briefing into a MAGA reality show." Laughter erupted. Donors chuckled. Whispers spread like wildfire. Karoline didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, her hand gripping the edge of the linen-draped table. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, cold and focused, spoke volumes. Then came the next blow. "And there's her husband, Mr. Nicholas Riccio," Schwarzenegger continued, voice slick with sarcasm. "A real estate guy? I assume he's here to sell condos to the MAGA crowd." He smirked, letting the line hang. tossing in a jab worthy of a red carpet roast. Maybe he's building a mega fortress with gold trim? Laughter burst again, louder this time. A few businessmen in the front row clapped. But in a quiet corner, a middle-aged veteran muttered, "This isn't the time or place." Another man beside him, gray at the temples, frowned, visibly uncomfortable. Karoline's jaw tightened. Her fingers curled. She glanced at Nicholas. Still silent, he sat stone-faced, but beneath the table, his fist clenched, white-knuckled. The man who once lived in his car, who fought tooth and nail to build his business from nothing, was now the butt of a joke. Not for who he was, but for who he wasn't. And Schwarzenegger wasn't done. Honestly, he chuckled, pointing toward Nicholas, I thought he was just carrying Miss Levitt's bag. She's the main act, right? He's just the plus one. The sidekick. The small-town businessman married to the MAGA diva. The laughter that followed was thinner now, more hesitant. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. Near the back, a veteran leaning on a cane stood and walked out, shaking his head. This is a charity gala, not a late-night roast, another donor whispered. Karoline stood. In a sweeping motion, her navy gown trailing behind her, she strode toward the stage with calm fury, every step deliberate, her presence impossible to ignore. The room hushed. And for the first time all evening, the man who had commanded the spotlight watched it shift entirely away from himself. The room held its breath. A sudden hush fell over the grand ballroom as Karoline Levitt stepped up to the microphone, her heels echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. From the wings, Laura Bennett, seasoned journalist and the event's MC, hurried forward, whispering urgently, "Miss Levitt, you're not on the program." But it was too late. Karoline was already standing tall at center stage, her eyes fierce, her voice unwavering. A few feet away, Arnold Schwarzenegger folded his arms, the smirk on his face unmistakably smug. "Decided to join the entertainment, Miss Levitt?" he teased, voice dripping with mockery. Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't even glance his way. Instead, she turned to the crowd and spoke with sharp, unwavering conviction. "I came here to honor our veterans, not to watch my husband reduced to a cheap punchline by someone who confuses fame with substance." There was a pause, then a single clap. A young veteran in the audience stood and applauded. Others quickly followed. Her voice strengthened. Nicholas Riccio doesn't need the stage, the cameras, or a governor's title to prove his worth. He built a life from nothing, a life no spotlight could ever diminish. You may be a cinematic icon, Mr. Schwarzenegger, but tonight you've only managed to dim the very cause we're here to celebrate. A swell of emotion rippled through the room. A young vet raised his fist in solidarity. An older woman near the front, clutching a folded photo of her fallen son, nodded silently, tears brimming in her eyes. From the donor tables, whispers turned to murmurs of admiration. "She's not just a headline," one muttered. "She's the real deal." Schwarzenegger stepped forward, trying to recover the moment. He reached for the mic. But Karoline stopped him cold, with nothing but a glance and an outstretched hand. "I'm done," she said, her tone ice. "But if you want to keep swinging, pick a worthy opponent." She gently placed the microphone down and walked off the stage with her head high, her gown flowing like a banner of quiet defiance. Nicholas rose from his seat, eyes full of pride and concern. As she returned to their table, he took her hand, whispering, "You just made the whole room remember why they came here tonight." But they both knew the real battle had just begun. From the back of the room, a young attendee tapped his phone screen. He'd captured the entire confrontation. Seconds later, the clip went viral online. Karoline Levitt just silenced Schwarzenegger at the gala. Comment sections lit up. "She's a force." "Arnold picked the wrong fight." Still standing in the stage lights, Schwarzenegger cleared his throat, trying to laugh off the shift in energy. "Well, this Levitt knows how to light a fire," he said with a forced grin. A few half-hearted chuckles followed. But he wasn't done. His gaze shifted, back to Nicholas. "I was only joking," Schwarzenegger said, eyes gleaming. "Surely Mr. Riccio's too busy building mansions for Trump supporters to take the mic, right?" He held up a hand as if cueing the crowd again. "Smart man, staying behind the scenes while the wife takes the spotlight. That's strategy, yeah." This time, the laughs were sparse. Uncomfortable. A few scattered murmurs cut through the awkwardness. In the back row, a young veteran whispered to his friend, "He doesn't know when to quit." A woman wearing a black bracelet inscribed with an Army memorial number narrowed her eyes. She'd heard enough. At their table, Karoline felt fury rise in her chest. She began to stand once more. But Nicholas placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was soft, calm, and unmistakably sure. Let me. She turned to him, surprised, but said nothing. She simply nodded. Nicholas stood, tall, composed, with a quiet strength that silenced the moment before he even reached the podium. His time had come. Each of his steps echoed on the polished floor like a quiet drumbeat of defiance. The ballroom froze. The air thickened with tension. Nicholas Riccio walked with steady resolve, every stride a silent challenge to the night's glittering power. Laura Bennett, still shaken by what had just unfolded, instinctively stepped forward to intervene, but one look at Nicholas stopped her cold. His calm, unwavering gaze said everything. A nearby stagehand, sensing something profound was about to happen, wordlessly handed him a microphone. Schwarzenegger stood at the podium, his smirk faltering. His voice, still coated in mockery, tried to regain control. "Ah, Mr. Riccio wants the spotlight now too," he quipped. But his eyes, the seasoned actor's giveaway, showed uncertainty. This wasn't part of the script. Nicholas didn't respond immediately. He stood center stage, tall beneath the spotlight's full intensity, not looking for attention, but prepared to face it. When he finally spoke, his voice rang deep and firm, no theatrics, no anger, just the truth, sharp and clear. "I'm not here for applause," he began, his tone measured, his gaze steady. "I don't need anyone's spotlight. I don't want it. But when someone uses my life, my sacrifices, my struggles, as the setup for a joke, I won't stay seated." The silence in the room was so complete, it felt sacred. An older veteran clutched his service medal tightly, eyes locked on Nicholas, filled with respect. Nicholas continued, his words now cutting through the room like steel. "Karoline doesn't need me to stand up for her. She's stronger than anyone on this stage. But strength deserves respect, not mockery. And those of us who've come from nothing, who fought quietly and without a camera, deserve dignity." Then he turned to Schwarzenegger directly, not with rage, but with a cool, piercing honesty. "You may have played heroes in movies, but tonight, you forgot what real honor looks like. You used your platform not to lift others up, but to belittle someone who's never asked for anything but to be treated with decency." He paused. The silence teetered on the edge of eruption. "And while you pretend to speak for veterans tonight, let me remind you, honor isn't loud. It's not dressed in applause. It's standing here when it would have been easier to stay silent." Then it happened. The room exploded. Applause thundered through the hall. Veterans stood, young and old, from medal bearers to cane-wielding patriots. Their cheers weren't just for Nicholas. They were for the truth. In the VIP section, a woman with silver hair and tear-filled eyes leaned to her friend and whispered, "Now that's a real man." From backstage, Laura Bennett covered her mouth, caught in the raw beauty of the moment. Schwarzenegger stepped back, visibly shaken. His composure cracked, his trademark confidence gone. He opened his mouth, but the roar of the audience drowned him out. His hands clenched into fists, not in strength, but in frustration. He had no comeback. Nicholas said nothing more. He gently set the microphone down and walked off the stage, not in triumph, but in peace. The applause followed him like a tide. Karoline was already rising to meet him. She took his hand, tears shining in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Nicholas gave a quiet smile. "I just said what needed to be said." But they both knew it was more than that. This wasn't just a response. It was a line drawn in the sand, a moment that reminded everyone watching that truth, when spoken with honor, can shake even the brightest rooms. Laura Bennett stepped forward again, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Mr. Riccio, for speaking from the heart." And though the night would continue, nothing that followed would outshine what had just been said. Karoline turned slowly toward Schwarzenegger, her expression calm but piercing. "Do you have anything to add?" she asked, her voice firm and measured. The former governor forced a smile, then shook his head. "No," he muttered, and gave a small wave as if yielding the stage. Without another word, he stepped down from the podium. Backstage, his PR team swarmed, their faces tight with panic. One aide leaned in and whispered urgently, "This is a PR disaster." Schwarzenegger's jaw tensed. His eyes, darkened with fury, scanned the room. "They want a war," he said under his breath. "Fine. I'll give them one." Inside the ballroom, the tension still clung to the air like static. A young veteran made his way through the crowd and approached Karoline and Nicholas's table. He extended his hand to Nicholas. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Those words, you didn't just speak for her. You spoke for all of us." Across the room, one of the donors who had laughed earlier leaned toward a friend and whispered, "I was wrong. That man's got real courage." At the table, Karoline looked at Nicholas, and something between them shifted, not just love, but something deeper, a mutual resolve. A bond forged not in privacy, but now tempered in public fire. Whatever was coming next, they would face it together. Outside the ballroom, the digital world erupted. Journalists at the gala fired off texts to editors. Front page. Riccio made Arnold look weak. One freelance reporter posted on X, Nicholas Riccio didn't just defend his wife, he defended the values this event was built on. Clips of Nicholas's takedown flooded social media, especially one slowed-down shot of him locking eyes with Schwarzenegger, calm and devastating. Caption: "This is the look that ended the performance." Another meme went viral. Image: Nicholas at the mic text: "You don't need muscles to take down the Terminator." Karoline and Nicholas were now trending together. The chandeliers sparkled, the auction resumed, and Laura Bennett tried to guide the evening forward. But the mood had changed. Every guest knew something larger had just unfolded. Schwarzenegger sat at a back table, surrounded by aides and his visibly rattled PR team. He stared straight ahead, but his fists were clenched beneath the white linen. "This isn't over," he muttered to his top advisor, a sharply dressed woman rapidly tapping messages into her phone. "They humiliated me. I faced worse. They're not getting away with it." The advisor nodded, already contacting a crisis management firm. Within hours, they had a damage control strategy ready. By midnight, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Washington skyline, Schwarzenegger sat at a mahogany desk, his team drafting a legal response. The glow of city lights framed him like the closing shot of a political thriller. A cease and desist letter was finalized, accusing Karoline and Nicholas of making defamatory and misleading remarks that damaged his reputation. The letter, sent to Karoline's White House office, was deliberately leaked to select media outlets for maximum exposure. But the damage was already done, and social media wasn't on his side. Almost in sync, a shadow campaign kicked off online. Anonymous accounts, some suspiciously well-organized, began posting under a new hashtag #LevittLies. The narrative flipped. Karoline exaggerated the moment to score political points. Just another MAGA stunt to paint themselves as victims. Schwarzenegger was joking. They turned it into drama. But despite the noise, the real story had already taken hold, and it wasn't in Schwarzenegger's control anymore. Across social media, a new question began circulating. Is Nicholas Riccio really self-made, or just a political prop for his wife? Back in their Washington, D.C. apartment, the morning light poured through the kitchen windows, golden and unbothered by the storm brewing outside. Karoline sat at the table, reading the letter that had just arrived. Her coffee sat untouched, already cold. Nicholas stood by the stove, brewing tea. "What's it say?" he asked calmly. She slid the letter toward him. "He's accusing us of defamation," she said, her tone flat, but her eyes icy. "Schwarzenegger wants to play legal games." Nicholas scanned the document, his brow tightening. He set it down slowly. "He's rattled," he said. "A man who's confident doesn't make this much noise." Karoline nodded, but her mind was already shifting into strategy mode. She'd handled smear campaigns before. This one would be no different. Meanwhile, in a makeshift D.C. command center, Schwarzenegger's PR team gathered in emergency session. The atmosphere was tense. "We need to shift the narrative fast," said a young strategist, hair pulled tightly into a high bun. "If we frame Karoline as an opportunist, someone using the gala for political gain, we can take back control." Schwarzenegger sat at the head of the table, silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "She's more dangerous than I thought. She's not just a mouthpiece, she's a fighter." Still, he gave the nod. The smear campaign launched within hours. Friendly media outlets were contacted. Stories began appearing on smaller conservative news sites. Levitt using Veterans Gala for political theater? Nicholas Riccio, self-made or riding coattails? But Karoline didn't flinch. At the White House, she convened her media team in a secured conference room. Fire lit her voice. "If Schwarzenegger wants to go low, we go precise. Not spin truth." From a locked drawer, she retrieved a thick file, internal communications from Schwarzenegger's tenure as California governor. Among them, documents detailing the quiet cancellation of a veterans job training program in 2009. Publicly, the cut had been blamed on budget constraints. But private emails told another story. It had been a political decision, meant to distance his administration from a conservative veterans organization. "He didn't just mock my husband," she told her team. "He abandoned the very people he now claims to champion." That evening, Karoline appeared on Tucker Green's primetime show. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, her demeanor was composed, her tone lethal. Mr. Schwarzenegger claims we defamed him, she said. But let me be clear. In 2009, he canceled a veteran support program, not to save money, but to save face. Here's the proof. She held up the file as the camera zoomed in on highlighted emails, complete with timestamps, signatures, and internal memos. The studio exploded with applause. Even Tucker Green, known for his no-nonsense approach, leaned forward. You just dropped a political bombshell. The internet lit up. Veterans began posting their own stories. One tweeted, I was in that 2009 program. Arnold left us behind. Karoline's not lying. Another post read, Schwarzenegger wants to sue Karoline? She just nuked his credibility. A meme spread like wildfire. Image, Schwarzenegger mid-speech. Caption, I'll be back, but not for the veterans. Veterans groups issued public statements. The VFW, American Legion, and smaller nonprofits lined up behind Karoline, calling for an apology. A press conference was held by a coalition of younger veterans. One speaker said plainly, we lost jobs because of Schwarzenegger's political games. Karoline's the only one brave enough to say it. In his hotel suite, Schwarzenegger sat watching the broadcast, his face darkening by the second. Aide after aide rushed to offer solutions. One whispered, we didn't know she had those files. Another proposed damage control. We could claim the emails are out of context. But Schwarzenegger raised his hand. Enough, he said, voice low and simmering. They want the truth? I'll show them I don't go down without a fight. He ordered his team to escalate the digital campaign. Soon, anonymous accounts began pushing conspiracy theories, accusing Karoline of forging the documents. The hashtag #LevittLies was launched, but the backlash was immediate. Independent journalists began verifying the documents, and within hours, multiple fact-checkers confirmed their authenticity. The smear attempt fell apart. That night, back in their apartment, Karoline and Nicholas sat on the sofa watching the coverage. Their hands were intertwined. The television played clips of veterans defending Karoline, footage of the Fox News interview, and side-by-side comparisons of Schwarzenegger's denials in the verified documents. Nicholas looked at her, a quiet pride in his eyes. You made him the story, he said softly, and he's not ready for it. Karoline offered a faint smile, but her gaze was unflinching. This isn't over, she said quietly. He's going to strike again, and we need to be ready. Nicholas tightened his grip on her hand, his voice low but unwavering. Together, we're unstoppable. The next morning, soft sunlight spilled through the curtains of their Washington, D.C. apartment. The television hummed in the background, looping Karoline's now-viral Fox News interview, where she'd exposed Schwarzenegger's controversial decision to cut veterans funding in 2009. Karoline sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Notifications exploded, thousands of comments, retweets, and shares ranging from fervent support to ridicule aimed at Schwarzenegger. But she didn't smile. He's too quiet, she murmured, eyes narrowing. Nicholas, pouring fresh coffee, placed a mug in front of her and sat across the table. Too quiet for too long, he agreed. He's waiting for the next opening. But you hit him hard. Now he has to tread carefully. Karoline nodded. She knew this wasn't over. Schwarzenegger, backed by an elite PR machine and decades of media clout, wouldn't go down without a counterstrike. His lawsuit letter and the #LevittLies smear campaign hadn't disappeared. They were smoldering embers waiting for fuel. What she didn't expect, however, was the fire that came from an entirely different source. In Los Angeles, sunlight filtered into an upscale office where Sylvester Stallone sat at his desk. The action film legend, rarely vocal about politics, was watching Karoline's interview again. He read the flood of online support and the growing backlash against his old friend Arnold Schwarzenegger. He leaned back in his chair, eyes focused. He remembered the camaraderie from the Expendables days, but he also remembered the value of loyalty and truth. After a pause, he opened his social media and typed, I've known Arnold for years. But Karoline Levitt is right. Veterans deserve respect, not politics. Truth matters more than fame. The internet detonated. Stallone's post ricocheted across the political spectrum. Action movie fans, veterans, and conservative voices rallied. One user wrote, Stallone just threw a Rambo punch at Arnold. Another meme paired Stallone and Karoline with the caption, When Rocky backs MAGA. Veterans organizations doubled down. One VFW leader shared Stallone's post with a caption, Thank you for standing up. Karoline Levitt is our voice now. Suddenly, the issue was no longer partisan. It was personal and national. Meanwhile, in New York, Meghan McCain took to her podcast. The daughter of the late Senator John McCain, a veteran herself, Meghan had her own gravitas. With emotion in her voice, she declared, "I may not agree with all of Trump's policies, but Karoline Leavitt and her husband did something brave, something few would dare. They stood up to a Hollywood icon and told the truth." Schwarzenegger owes veterans an apology, not a lawsuit. Clips of the podcast flooded timelines. One user tweeted, "Stallone and McCain are backing Karoline. Arnold's out of moves." In a small coffee shop in Virginia, a group of veterans gathered around a tablet, rewatching the interview for the third time. One of them, who'd participated in the very program Schwarzenegger canceled in 2009, quietly emailed Karoline, "Miss Leavitt, thank you for saying what we couldn't. We're behind you." Her media team shared the message with a caption, "This is why we fight." And the public listened. Karoline and Nicholas had become symbols, not just of political courage, but of ordinary people refusing to back down. Across the country, pressure mounted. In his luxurious D.C. hotel suite, Schwarzenegger sat alone, watching news coverage of Stallone's post and Meghan McCain's remarks. His PR team was unraveling. Voices clashed. "We need to do a charity appearance," one aide suggested. "Shift the focus." "It's too late," said a seasoned strategist grimly. Leavitt framed him as a betrayer of veterans, and now everyone's listening. Schwarzenegger slammed his fist onto the table. "I don't lose," he growled. "They want truth? Fine. I'll give them a different story." But the fire was gone from his voice. The arrogance had dimmed, and everyone in the room knew his next move was fraught with risk. At the White House, Karoline gathered her team. Her eyes burned with conviction as she reviewed screenshots of viral posts. "We don't just have Stallone and McCain," she said. "We have the people who matter, veterans, working Americans, those who've been ignored." She ordered a full-scale campaign to amplify their voices. Her team released a short video, now viewed millions of times. Real veterans recounting their experiences, their hardships, their betrayal by Schwarzenegger's 2009 decision, all intercut with Karoline's words, "We're not fighting for attention. We're fighting for truth." Back in Los Angeles, the lights from 100 digital screens flickered across the faces of Schwarzenegger's crisis team. One advisor with graying hair finally spoke up. "We can't win by attacking anymore. She's got the veterans, Stallone, McCain. This isn't a political story anymore. It's a cultural one." No one in the room argued. That night, Karoline and Nicholas sat quietly in their apartment, the news playing softly on the TV. A clip from a veterans press conference flickered on screen. Karoline, in a simple sweater, held Nicholas's hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were steeled. "We've backed him into a corner," she said. Nicholas leaned forward. "But he won't apologize. He's too proud." Karoline nodded. "Then we'll make sure he stays silent." Public opinion had turned decisively and irreversibly. In a dimly lit strategy room, a young aide cautiously suggested a possible way out. "Maybe we film a charity video. Arnold with veterans. Humanize him." The lead PR consultant shook her head. "Too late. It'll look staged." Leavitt painted him as a hypocrite, and it stuck. Schwarzenegger joined the meeting remotely via Zoom, his face rigid, his silence heavy. "I just don't want to look like a loser," he finally said, barely above a whisper. But the defeat was already in his eyes. For the first time in his career, Arnold Schwarzenegger felt powerless. The next morning, a terse statement appeared on his official social media account. No video, no smiling image, just a quiet block of text. "I've always supported our veterans and regret if any past decisions caused misunderstanding. Let's focus on honoring our heroes." There was no mention of Karoline or Nicholas, no reference to the 2009 documents. But everyone knew it was a retreat. At the White House, an aide handed Karoline her phone. She read the post in silence. Her expression wasn't smug. It was focused. "He's done fighting," she said quietly. "But we're not." She immediately instructed her media team to keep the momentum going, amplifying the voices of veterans and allies like Stallone and Meghan McCain. That same afternoon, a tweet from her official account lit up the internet, grateful to the veterans, and to Stallone, McCain, and every American who stood for truth. "This victory isn't mine. It belongs to those who've earned respect." The post was shared tens of thousands of times. Comments poured in. "Karoline's a queen. Nicholas and Karoline are icons of integrity. They didn't just win, they rewrote the rules." Evening news programs, from Fox to CNN, ran with it. Headlines blared. Schwarzenegger retreats after veterans backlash. Karoline Leavitt forces Hollywood icon into silent surrender, a CBS anchor remarked. They did the unthinkable, forced a legend to bow without a courtroom or a settlement. An independent journalist published a widely read op-ed titled, Leavitt and Riccio didn't just defeat Arnold, they proved truth still wins. Veterans groups continued to rally behind the couple. One organization in Virginia invited Karoline and Nicholas to speak at a commemorative ceremony honoring voices who defend veteran dignity. A young vet posted, Karoline and Nicholas give us hope. They fought for us when no one else would. That evening, back in their apartment, Karoline and Nicholas sat quietly by the fireplace. The soft flicker of the flames cast dancing shadows across their faces. Nicholas, cradling a mug of tea, turned to her. You've changed how people see us, he said, voice low, filled with warmth. Karoline, wrapped in a blanket, smiled gently. No, you did. You stood up and spoke the truth. That changed everything. She paused, her gaze drifting to the fire. But I don't think he's finished, not deep down. He's too proud to stay quiet forever. Nicholas nodded, his fingers lacing with hers. Then we'll be ready. Like always. Thousands of miles away, at his Los Angeles mansion, Schwarzenegger watched the news alone. The screen showed clips from Karoline's speech, Stallone's post, and a veterans press conference. He turned off the TV in silence. His PR team had all but collapsed. A few staffers had already resigned. One former aide had texted bluntly, "We can't beat Leavitt. She's too smart." He didn't reply. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the horizon. He hadn't lost because of a lack of fame or force. He'd lost because Karoline and Nicholas had something he couldn't buy, integrity. Online, the story continued to spread. A viral tweet read, Karoline and Nicholas didn't just take down Arnold. They reminded us that honor still matters. A popular meme featured the couple side by side with the caption, when you fight Leavitt and Riccio, you lose before it begins. A freelance journalist wrote, this isn't Hollywood drama. This is a modern-day case study in standing up for what's right. Messages from veterans flooded in. One read, Karoline and Nicholas are our voice. Thank you for not giving up on us. In Richmond, Virginia, the sun set in golden hues over a field outside the community center, where hundreds gathered beneath gently waving American flags for a ceremony dedicated to truth, integrity, and those who dare to speak out. The event had taken on new meaning in the wake of Karoline and Nicholas's public stand. Now, it was not just a tribute, it was a movement. Karoline entered the field in a long navy coat, her hair tied back, her presence calm but strong. Beside her, Nicholas wore a white shirt and a light gray vest, his quiet demeanor exuding steady strength. An elderly veteran in a red beret approached them, extending a trembling hand to Nicholas. You made us proud, he said softly. Nicholas bowed his head. We just did what was right, sir. Karoline, watching the moment unfold, felt something deeper than victory, something unshakable. They hadn't just fought for their names. They'd fought for something far greater. And they weren't done yet. They had reignited something sacred, faith in the veteran community. When the organizers invited Karoline Leavitt to deliver the keynote address at the Honoring Truth ceremony in Richmond, Virginia, she accepted with humility. As she stepped up to the simple wooden podium, a golden sunset poured through the high windows, casting a soft glow over the room. There were no bright lights, no cameras, no Hollywood glitz. Just rows of weathered faces, men and women who had known sacrifice, who had lived through war and hardship. This, Karoline felt, was where she truly belonged. She rested her hands on the podium and scanned the room. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and warm, like a friend beside a campfire. I'm not here for applause or victory, she began. I'm here for you, the ones who taught me that courage doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a spine. Gentle applause swept through the room. When Nicholas and I were mocked, we didn't respond out of pride, she continued. We spoke up because we believe no one who served this country should ever be reduced to a joke, especially by those who claim to honor them. In the second row, a young veteran clutched his wife's hand and nodded. Karoline met his gaze with quiet resolve. We live in an era where fame often overshadows truth. But you've taught me something else. Honor can't be bought. Honor is earned. It's standing up when it's easier to stay quiet. At the back of the room, Nicholas stood against the wall, listening. Memories flooded his mind, sleeping in his car, building his business from nothing, never imagining he'd one day be part of something this public or this meaningful. Beside him, an older Marine veteran leaned over and whispered, "We need people like you, too." Nicholas nodded. She was born for this. Karoline's voice rose slightly, a gentle crescendo. Today, we don't just look back. We look forward. We commit to a future where truth lights the way, where those who sacrifice are honored, and where standing together still matters. She bowed her head. The room erupted into a standing ovation. Some clapped, others called out her name. A veteran with a cane raised his hand in salute, eyes wet with emotion. Nicholas stepped forward to meet her, embracing her softly. "You touched their hearts," he whispered, his voice unsteady. Karoline took his hand, her own voice trembling. "We did it, together." Veterans surrounded them. They shared stories of loss and resilience. One woman held up a photo of her fallen son and said, "You gave us back something we'd lost, faith." Footage of Karoline's speech spread quickly across the internet. One user posted, "Karoline Levitt isn't just a press secretary. She's a torchbearer of truth." A meme circulated with Karoline and Nicholas side by side, captioned, "The couple who beat Hollywood, with heart." Veterans flooded timelines with messages of gratitude. "They didn't abandon us. They became our voice." In Los Angeles, Schwarzenegger sat alone in his office, scrolling through the news coverage. He didn't speak. He didn't post. An email pinged from an old friend. "Let it go, Arnold. They've already won." He didn't respond. He just stared out at the California skyline. He wasn't defeated by Karoline, but by his own missteps. After the ceremony, Karoline and Nicholas drove in silence. A commemorative plaque rested in her lap, etched with 2 words, "Truth prevails." She stared at it quietly. The battle, from the Grand Meridian Gala to the viral interviews and finally this moment, had changed them. Not just as individuals, but as symbols of something far greater. She looked at Nicholas, his hands steady on the wheel. "We did something big," she said softly. Nicholas smiled. "We gave people hope. They didn't need grand speeches. Their unity said everything. Their story became a beacon." Online, posts continued to flood in. They didn't just take down a Hollywood icon. They reminded us that truth still has power. A viral meme captured the moment. Image, Karoline and Nicholas holding hands on stage. Caption, "When you fight for what's right, the world stands with you." Veterans across the country embraced their story. It became a rallying cry for the forgotten, a tribute to honor, a rejection of empty fame. Back in Los Angeles, Schwarzenegger remained quiet. He had stopped giving interviews, stopped responding to messages. His once unshakable image now bore a visible scar, not inflicted by a scandal, but by truth. One former advisor texted, "They were stronger than you thought, Arnold." He didn't answer, just stared into the darkness, knowing he had been defeated not by louder voices, but by those who refused to be silenced. Karoline returned to her role at the White House. Nicholas resumed his real estate work. But their story didn't fade. They were invited to veteran conferences, universities, and news panels, not as politicians, but as people who had stood firm. One young veteran wrote to Karoline, "Because of you, I found the courage to speak up." She kept that letter in her desk. The story of Karoline Levitt and Nicholas Riccio versus Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't just a media moment, it was a cultural mirror. A reminder that in today's America, where influence often overrules integrity, truth still matters. Their journey showed the power of evidence-backed action, of standing together, and of daring to confront those who misuse their platform. Their unlikely allies, Stallone, McCain, the veterans, revealed that integrity transcends party lines and celebrity. In Karoline's final speech, spoken in a modest room full of heroes, echoed far beyond that night. Honor is greater than fame. Truth is louder than spin. And courage begins with a single voice willing to rise. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of truth, courage, and the quiet heroes who change the world, not with spotlight, but with integrity. Thank you for watching. See you in the next.